You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello everybody. I'm Eric Fansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And of course, we're your hosts for this show. So, Palpatine just doesn't really seem to ever want to go away for very long, does he?
It's like the Austin Powers thing. It's like, why won't you die?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's very much, he more or less mirrors the fictional character in the timeline or whatever, because it just seems like every time we've seen the last of him, he pops back up. Now, I will say this, though. At least it makes sense for him to be in this.
Yeah, definitely. Ian, what we're talking about is that Ian McDiarmid made hints that he may pop up in the Obi Wan series, and it, like you just said, it makes sense for him to be in this timeline, obviously, because this is when the Empire is pretty much at its zenith. They got to the completion of the Death Star. They're ready to start blowing up stuff. They already kind of did in Rogue One, but so good old, and I'm gonna just give him his old name, Sheev Palpatine, is up to his old tricks again, popping up and stuff, possibly. So this hasn't been confirmed yet, but he definitely teased it, saying that he may be returning for Obi Wan, which is cool. I mean, like I would love to see more of Palpatine. I love the character. I love Ian McDiarmid playing Palpatine. I think he's a perfect person for it. It makes sense because Vader's, of course, in it, which Ian McDiarmid mentioned in the thing, like, Vader's back in it, so it wouldn't be a surprise if his mentor was around or popped up or something like that. So,
well,
I mean,
absolutely,
cool.
Man. It is cool. And what's really cool about it is a couple of things. First of all, we know if Ian McDiarmid is teasing it, then it's probably happening. He was somewhat coy about his whole Rise of Skywalker thing too, and that turned out to be true.
Until the trailer happened, it was like, oh, well, yeah, of course he is.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It's one of those things where I really think that if he's bringing it up and he's making coy little hints, I could see a situation where maybe he just says stuff like that. He's not really one to throw people off the track, but I could see it's one of those things that it's almost like leaving the door open, because one of the possibilities that we could talk about right out the gate is, well, actually, that's not true. I was going to say he can pop up later, but Obi Wan's a single season show, right?
Well, so was Boba Fett at first too.
Well,
we'll
yeah, that's yeah, but with the whole Boba Fett thing though, they pretty much decided that before it even aired. Now it's true they can make an announcement next month, which would still be a full month before Obi Wan comes out, and just be like, oh yeah, well we're gonna do a season 2 or whatever. But given the fact that the whole Obi Wan story has to happen in a finite amount of time, right? I mean, we're 10 years after episode 3, which means we're about 9 years before episode 4. So while they could conceivably carry the storyline for 2 or 3 or 4 seasons, it seems to me like there's just not a whole lot that they could really do. Whereas Boba Fett, you have 30 years of time to play with. And really beyond. Because even with the sequel trilogy, that doesn't mean that other stuff could be happening on Boba Fett's end. He just wasn't participating in what was going on with the sequel trilogy. So there's that.
Yeah, I mean, all very valid and good points. Yeah, I mean, Obi-Wan is supposed to be a 6-episode series at that. So is even shorter
is it 6?
Yeah, 6. It debuts May 25th of this year. And some people have even been kind of speculating, everybody's kind of wondering, like, are we going to when are we going to see our first look at it, like a trailer or something like that? We're hoping for March.
It's got to be soon. I mean,
yeah, man, because if it's debuting the 25th of May, I mean, you gotta pub this thing.
March is right around the corner, and I mean, I tend to agree with you. I think that if we do see anything, it's probably going to be like maybe we get a teaser in March, and then going into April, maybe we get our first real trailer. Maybe there's like a 30-second to minute teaser, and then in April you get like the whole 2-minute trailer that they usually do, and then come May they'll start doing all the TV spots. But if Palpatine is actually involved in it, I honestly think what they're going to do is something very similar to The Rise of Skywalker. They did reveal his involvement later on, but that's because he was a seriously key plot point.
Component.
Yeah. I mean, just without question. Whereas in Obi Wan, I could see him maybe, and we're going to get more into this because first we're dealing with, okay, what is the likelihood that Ian McDiarmid is just, having fun with the fans, or is he really foreshadowing an appearance in this series? So that's the first thing. But the second thing that we have to look at is, okay, if Palpatine is in fact in the show, and like you said, it's only 6 episodes, where does he fit in? What does he do? What's his role and involvement? So I think that... Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think if we see him, it would probably definitely be in the finale.
Oh, you think all the way in the finale?
I mean, I'm not saying that'll be his only appearance. I'm just saying, like, I think definitely we'll see him in the finale. Like, because, that's when the culmination, he has to face Vader, meaning Obi Wan. So, I mean, there's got to be some, I can see Palpatine being like, be careful, Lord Vader, last time, when you face your old master, I'm saying something to that effect. Just, I don't want to pull you out the fire, your butt out the fire.
Yeah, exactly. It's again. Like, listen, the last time we did this, it cost me a lot of money.
Buddy.
Exactly right. I had to do the whole suit thing. It cost me a lot of money. You were a Sith Lord for like 10 minutes, and then you were already critically injured. Not getting a lot of ROI here, buddy. So yeah, I could definitely see something like that. That's a good point. But personally, what I think will probably happen, because we know that Inquisitors are going to be in this thing. So we know that the Jedi hunting is still going on. Mm-hmm. And it's something that you had brought up. I don't even know anymore. We've been talking about this stuff in so many shows, but it was one of the more recent shows that we've done where you brought up the fact that even though Order 66 is a little ways out at this point, right? Because we're 10 years now removed from when Order 66 was first done. They're still hunting Jedi, which means that Palpatine still has an interest in making sure that the Jedi are pretty much definitely gone. And, of course, Obi Wan represents a huge threat. Oh, and Joanne joins us.
Hey.
But the thing is, they can't really overuse Palpatine in this show because you don't really want to make it about him. But the question that I have that we can both address today is, how much involvement does he really have, though? Because I could actually make an argument either way. I mean, I could see him being the figurehead puppet master that you maybe see in a total of, I don't know, something like 2 scenes in the entire show. But I could also see him playing a more prominent role, though, especially given the Jedi hunting that's going on. Because I'll tell you, the Darth Vader comics, he plays a huge role in those. And he also plays a pretty big role in some of the other comic series, too, because he's a lot more central of a character in the Star Wars universe, particularly in this time period, than I think a lot of people realize.
Well, I think you could, and the cool thing with Palpatine is you can play him a bunch of different ways. He's not like a Vader, where people really want to see Vader, and Vader is really like a star within his own right. Palpatine is as well, but it's like you're so accustomed to him being in the shadows. I mean, because if you think about it, New Hope, we never saw him. We only saw like a hologram of him in Empire. We really didn't see him until like he in the flesh, so to speak.
Such as it is.
The Jedi.
Well, right. Yeah.
So
I mean,
I think,
well, it's true. He's only mentioned in A New Hope.
Exactly. So I think that, in Obi Wan, because like you said, you don't want to, the stories about Obi Wan. I think the scenes that we see with him, I could see that maybe a couple of, like, I think we're going to get as much screen time with him as we did in Empire. That's what I would say. And as far as true screen time, now I can see communications being done, like maybe um Vader's in his, his, I would say his office, but his little room or whatever. And, Palpatine's just like, calls him up and says, Lord Vader, there's a disturbance, go to here and deal with this situation. Yes, my master. And then he goes off. You know what I mean? Like, it's just always like, once again, his presence, no different than how Vader was in Rogue One. We felt his presence, no pun intended, being there because we saw a couple of scenes with him. And it was like, okay, we know he's around. I mean, of course, we get this glorious thing at the end of it, but I mean, Vader's around. So with Palpatine, you didn't have to do this. Same thing with Tarkin. They didn't. Tarkin was a central part of the whole thing, but in Rogue One, you really didn't see Tarkin a whole lot.
No,
so
just a couple of scenes.
Yeah, and that's how I feel like we're going to get with Palpatine because at this time, remember, he's still in the shadows. He's kind of been swept in the back because he still doesn't want people to really know that he's the guy that's really running the show. It's Vader now. So I think that's kind of how it's probably going to go for Obi-Wan.
Well, and I'll add to that. There's a lot of things to unpack with this. One, I think that there's actually more that we're going to see of Tarkin. I can actually see more Tarkin scenes than Palpatine scenes. Particularly if you think back to A New Hope, you have the whole thing to where, Tarkin was like, he is here. Are you sure? That whole thing. He obviously knew who Obi Wan was, and he was really concerned.
Well, yeah, because he knows Obi Wan even from the Clone Wars that we saw in the animation.
Absolutely.
So he knows, and I can see, like I said, even with Palpatine, like I can understand why he would. Now, to your point earlier about, you could see Palpatine being there more prominently. I could see that simply because of that it's Obi-Wan. It's not like some, Ahsoka.
Exactly.
Oh, but it's like this guy was actually on the council. This guy was like, he knows how powerful Obi-Wan is. And he knows what he means to Anakin / Vader.
But it's not just that, though. There's another thing you got to look at.
And more powerful.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the other thing that I was going to say is the fact that, they never really found Yoda. And so you got to think, well, if Obi-Wan's still around, is Yoda still around? Because that would actually strike fear into them. And I'm sure that's one of the things. Now, with this Inquisitor character, we don't know if it's just a general Inquisitor that's going around looking for Jedi, or is this Inquisitor... Maybe they hear of Obi-Wan. It's like, okay, your one mission is just to find and kill Obi-Wan. That's it. Yeah, right.
And that's probably
you got one job.
Yep. Yep. And I think that's probably it because, like he said, they're Jedi hunters. So, once Vader gets wind that Obi-Wan's still around, he's like, well, yeah, he's got to get dealt with. But, he probably figures, okay, Obi-Wan's older at this point. They kind of do that whole underestimate that they feel the dark side is more powerful now because they feel it in the Force, and so they probably have that sense of overconfidence, and that Inquisitor is probably going to get dispatched probably rather quickly because if Obi-Wan did what he did to Maul in a matter of seconds,
yeah, absolutely.
that Inquisitor's got no hope.
Let me ask you this though, because you actually bring up an interesting point. So. They're feeling that the dark side is stronger or whatever. One of the things that I thought was really kind of cool was that Lucas had revealed during one of the commentaries or something that during the prequel era, Palpatine was clouding the light side. And of course, you saw evidence of that all over the place. And even Yoda by episode 3 recognized, like, I don't think we're really seeing everything. I mean, something's going on. He and Mace were conferring. Yeah, like, there's there's
Are you
something.
feeling this, dude?
Yeah, there's something, because a lot of times they're starting to realize that, hey, you know, some of this stuff that's clouded should not be clouded. So there's something going on. Now, of course, one of the things that was confirmed by Lucas as well is that during the original trilogy, it was Yoda that was then clouding the dark side. The question becomes, when did that begin? When did it start?
Right.
Because did it start around the time of Obi Wan? You know, like, did Yoda basically land on Dagobah and just, all right, I'm going to maybe decompress for a week and then I'm getting to work.
Put on a pot of coffee.
Put on a pot of coffee, yep. Make some of that little stew like he made in Empire. And
eat a couple of frogs, and they love those.
I know. That's the thing that I was kind of freaking out about too after Grogu. I'm like, do they outgrow that, or is like Yoda just looking and just, you know,
like frogs are like chicken tenders or something to Grogu or something. They're like little nuggets.
All right. Well, Joanne asks, is there a Palpatine comic?
No, but I want one.
Yeah. Well, that would actually be interesting. I mean, I would like to see. Well, of course, we've said we would love to have a Disney Plus series starring Tom Hiddleston as a young Palpatine. Of course, or a movie, you know, either way. I mean, I think a series would actually play out a little bit better because you can get into more. Plus, you'd almost have to do it in the style of the Book of Boba Fett, where you do some flashback stuff and then some current stuff. But he's been in a ton of comics, and he's certainly a central figure that is throughout a number of the comics, particularly ones that play out during the time of, say, the prequels all the way through, well, the original trilogy. Because the comics that are out now, he factors fairly heavy in. Because you have to remember, too, that part of Vader's motivation is wanting to kill and get his revenge on Palpatine, and he's just biding his time. You know, he's always trying to train somebody to help take him out and everything. And then finally, when he learns of Luke's existence, it's like, oh, well, that's a no-brainer. Right. But it just makes me wonder, getting back to this, how far back did Yoda actually start clouding the dark side? Because that's a very good point. And it makes you wonder, when the snippets that we're getting, there's going to be an Inquisitor involved. Obi Wan and Vader are going to face off again. You know, we're getting all these little nuggets of information about this series still, because Lucasfilm are masters at this. They're great at giving you a ton of information, but no context and no overall plot. So you still can't really figure out what the thing is about. Like, as much as we know about Obi-Wan, we still don't know what it's about. We kind of do.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I think to your question, it can go, once again, it's one of those things that can go several different ways. I could see it in my mind going possibly one of three. Either at the beginning of Obi-Wan, you know, they already kind of started to, like, you know, maybe Yoda is clouding the light side a bit. I mean, not the light side, the dark side a bit. But one of the things that I've been hearing a lot of is that Qui-Gon is supposed to appear to Obi-Wan. If that happens, I wonder if that is kind of like, maybe that's the missing piece for Yoda and Obi-Wan that they didn't have before. So maybe Qui-Gon, because you know, Obi-Wan's in his despair. He's, you know, upset. He's like, man, you know, I lost Anakin. We let down the galaxy, and Vader's running this thing now.
Right.
But then it's like, if Qui-Gon appears to him, he's like, well, you know, don't be so hard on yourself. The reason why you couldn't do it is because Palpatine was clouding. Palpatine was clouding the light side, so you couldn't see what was in front of you. That's why you couldn't do it, and that's why. So it wasn't really you. It was more so him, and you guys didn't know that he even existed. So,
well, but again, going with that whole theme, right? So, you watch those last few scenes of Revenge of the Sith, and basically when Yoda talks to Obi Wan aboard the Tantive 4, it's like, oh yeah, well, more training, I have for you or whatever. And it's like, and then he reveals a whole old friend thing, and it's Qui-Gon, and that whole thing. So obviously, Qui-Gon talked to Yoda and maybe taught him some stuff, because we know that one of the things, at least one of the primary things that Qui-Gon taught him or them or whatever, is the whole Force Ghost thing. Like, I mean, I remember we had a great discussion about that. I remember we were just laughing and making fun of the whole thing. Like, how do you even practice that? I mean, is this something that you stumbled on? Like, I was just over there dying and kind of grunted or moved a certain way and popped out a Force Ghost. I mean, you can't practice that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I really wish I could say something to Obi-Wan right now. And the Force is like, well, you can. All you gotta do is, so,
right.
But I think though, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think in those training things, like, a lot more might be revealed to them as to what was going on, because Qui-Gon was a part of that too.
No, you got a point, actually. I mean, especially if he became a Force Ghost and he was able to more or less see what was going on after he died, then yeah, he might be able to offer them. That's true. It wasn't just a matter of teaching him some techniques or something like that, although that is a very important thing that plays out the rest of the saga, really. Because, like, everybody's a Force Ghost now. Jeez, even Han Solo, even though that was a vision, look, everybody is a Force Ghost these days. But you do have a good point, though, is that maybe it's more than just techniques and stuff. Maybe it's partially perspective. Like, hey, here's basically what happened. This is why you failed.
No different than what Yoda did for Luke and The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
When Luke was all down and Yoda popped up, it was like, look, man, page turners there or not, it's like, look, dude, failure is a part of this. You gotta go through this, and this is why. And so maybe that's the same thing Qui-Gon does for Obi-Wan, is kind of explain to him, look, I mean, failure is a part of this, but also, there was some dark side influences that you weren't aware of. None of us were.
There's things that were beyond their control.
Yeah. And that's, of course, now, and I think that's one of those things too about the Force, is that now, up until at least then, no one has returned back to talk about what it's like on the other side of the Force. And so when you become one with the Force, you understand the complete balance of things. And so now, because as a living person, you're trying to keep the balance of the Force, but you're playing to one side. Now that you're one with it, you understand everything about it, because that's what you are. You're the embodiment of it. So I think that we might get a lot more knowledge about even the Force in this, and that would be cool. And that would help us understand. So I could also see that Yoda might be blocking the dark side at the end of Obi-Wan. Like, okay, now that I understand, if it could be done on their side, it has to be able to be done on the opposite. So maybe we can tilt it in our favor as Luke is getting older. We're going to need that to our advantage. And I can do that for where I am because I'm surrounded by all this life.
Well, here's the only problem that I have. I mean, I certainly hope. I mean, look, I think we are going to get a little bit more explanation on some elements of the Force. No different than even if you take some of the, and I'm not talking about the Clone Wars overall, if you just focus on a couple of episodes when we meet the Bendu, for instance. That gave us a little bit more information. That's like a 20-minute episode, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a possibility of that. But see, my problem is, and again, this is what I keep going back to, and this is the only thing that I sometimes wonder if Disney and Lucasfilm aren't making somewhat of a mistake by making all these series so short. The Book of Boba Fett could have been, and probably arguably should have been, 12 episodes instead of 8. And it worries me that Obi-Wan's only 6, because on one hand, we were happy about it because it's like, oh, cool. It's going to be a concise, no filler kind of storyline. We're not going to get, Frog Lady adventures like we did in The Mandalorian, even though I have argued and we have argued together on this show that wasn't necessarily filler, but it does make them get right to the point and get to the meat of the story. The flip side of that, though, is that are you giving yourselves enough time to fully flesh this stuff out? And that's what worries me.
It's got to be an hour.
Well, and even being an hour, well, and it is. And I don't know if you've read this or not. I don't know if I sent this along, but during one of the many times that, we're trading articles back and forth, I remember there was one thing that I had read. I don't know if I sent it along or not, but there was one thing that I read where it did say that they were gonna be about an hour episodes. Okay. And so that made me happy.
Yeah, because you did 30 minutes, only 6 episodes. I mean, yeah, that'd be a great disservice, especially to Obi Wan.
It'd be pointless. I mean, at that point, you might as well not even make the show. Just put it in a book or a comic or something.
Better off doing an animated series.
Yeah, well, and that's it. And I've often said that, again, I think in some cases, and I know we've done some of the stuff in the past, and we probably should do a show on this at some point in the future too, where it's what would be better for animation versus film versus some other medium like series, book or comics or series or anything, right? Because some of this stuff lends itself to that. Like, for instance, The High Republic. Recently read that The High Republic is going to have a show, and they're casting actors for it. They're implying it's live action, which is cool, but I almost wonder if an animated High Republic series wouldn't be the smarter move to basically introduce it into, well, beyond the realm of books and comics and everything. And that's what I'm thinking with Obi Wan too. It's like, and I'm not saying that Obi Wan should necessarily be an animated show, but what I do think is that if you take the time to get Hayden Christensen, Ewan McGregor, possibly Ian McDiarmid, of course, these other fine cast members that they put together to play these various roles, you really only want to do 6 one-hour episodes and possibly shortchange us on information? Because, again, I haven't seen it yet, so I have no idea whether or not this show should be more than 6 episodes. Maybe it shouldn't.
Right.
Hey, maybe 6 episodes is too much. I mean, I doubt it, but I'm just saying that, without seeing it and without seeing how the story progresses and everything, we don't know. Because I would say The Mandalorian is probably perfectly balanced. As far as... Yeah. The only complaint that I've ever had about that is I think some of the episodes should have been longer.
Yeah, sporadic runtimes are annoying.
Well, that's the other thing, too. The Mandalorian really suffered from the fact that, I mean, they were wildly sporadic, too. I remember there was a couple that were like 27 minutes, and you get one that's like 54. And I mean, on one hand, though, you can make the argument that each episode is as long as it needs to be. So, in other words, they're not struggling like, oh, man, we got to make this thing like 45 minutes, and we only have like 27 minutes of story. But on the other hand, there's always more that you can do with these characters in Star Wars. I don't really necessarily think for 1 second, and especially when you're talking about a show like the whole Obi Wan series. Obi Wan, I think, needs to be a pretty lengthy series.
I concur. I mean, if you're going to do it. And even with, like, you kind of want to see even dealing with Palpatine, like, what the heck is he doing, during this particular time period. I mean, I know because this is roughly around the time where the remnants of the Old Republic, have been swept away. So, I mean, I know Tarkin has, he's kind of like the political voice along with Vader, so to speak, during that time. But you got to kind of see how Palpatine is orchestrating this. That was one of the things I loved about the Clone Wars, is that you actually got to see how Palpatine did it, and it was just
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, this makes sense now. So yeah, it'll just be kind of interesting to see how that's done. So I mean, even like I said, with Palpatine being in the show, if he is indeed on the show, yeah, I could see them focusing a little bit more on him, simply because he knows who Obi Wan is and how powerful Obi Wan can be. But at the same time, he's still kind of arrogant, because he's like, well, I took off Yoda and I was by myself, so he thought, so you know, Obi Wan can't be that bad, you know.
No, but I have a feeling, since they announced that Jimmy Smits was going to be basically a part of it as Bail Organa again, I have a feeling that they're going to deal with a lot of the building of the Republic or the Rebellion.
Yeah, definitely the Rebellion.
Because if you think about it, in A New Hope, Leia, what does she do? She wants to reach out to Obi Wan. Well, why him? There's like a gazillion different Jedi and all that, but it was specifically Obi Wan. And then, of course, following that with Rogue One, same deal. Well, maybe we should call our friend the Jedi or whatever, and it's we know it's Obi Wan. So Obi Wan obviously played a pretty big role in the formation of the rebellion, along with these other senators. So I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of attention paid to that. Now, granted, it would be great if it were juxtaposed with how Palpatine was undermining everything, because one of the things where I think it's actually a really good point that you're making is the fact that, okay, he's in charge now. But the difference is, for a while, at least up until episode 4, he was still keeping up appearances. Yes, there was still a Senate, but they weren't the Republic Senate. Now they're the Imperial Senate. But the government essentially looked the same. It was actually a dictatorship, but it looked like a republic. Enough so it basically fooled the people. And then, of course, by the time we get to A New Hope, he just doesn't feel the need for the pretenses anymore. And it's like, all right, we're dissolving the Senate. The local governors and now have control. And I have a feeling what he was waiting for was the building of the Death Star. Once the Death Star was ready to go, all bets are off. Now I don't have to worry about it. And I think that being that the Death Star is being built during all this time, we might touch on that too. And that's what I'm saying. Yeah. I mean, obviously we're doing all this through the lens of Obi-Wan, but there's really a lot of things that you can cover during this time period.
Well, yeah, I mean, because you could bring up the whole Bothans, the Bothan spies, trying to get information to the Republic, to the Rebellion. It does beg the question, though. Do you think we'll see Yoda in this?
Yeah, I was wondering that too, because it seems to me like if you're going to show Palpatine, I mean, I guess it could go either way, because it could be that Yoda just, okay, here's your homework for the next 20 years. I'll be on Dagobah.
Call me if you need something.
Call me if you need something. On the other hand, during this whole scenes in Empire Strikes Back, when Luke was training and Obi-Wan and Yoda, Obi-Wan's Force Ghost and Yoda were conversing, it didn't seem like that was the first time. It seemed like there was that familiarity there. And Obi-Wan, of course, knew where Yoda was. That it makes me wonder, did they have any kind of contact when they were both in exile? Did Obi-Wan, in fact, fly to Dagobah every once in a while for whatever reason? Because that's the only way that I can see. Because at the end of Revenge of the Sith, we see Yoda land on Dagobah. He put himself in exile right away. It wasn't like, 5 or 10 years and it's like, all right, now I'm going to go hide out on Dagobah. No, he went there right away. So the only way that I could see Yoda appearing in the thing is if, for some reason, Obi-Wan feels compelled to go there for whatever.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, and this is why we say, Obi Wan shouldn't be 6 episodes, because there's so
Yeah,
much
man. I mean, there's
you
just a
could talk
lot.
about, and there's a lot of questions that need to be answered that you can really do on his show.
Well,
Um,
here's another thing though. Let me play devil's advocate here for a second. So, yes, we're actually giving a bunch of evidence like, okay, I'm thinking this thing needs to be like 22 episodes at this point, but the other way that I could see it being 6 episodes, again, even with what I'm about to say though, I still have a feeling that if you do it this way, that the whole one and done thing is a little weird, but especially when you assemble all these cast members. But again, like you said, money talks. Maybe they'll do a season 2. If they actually take a very laser focused story arc, and that's what they do, right? They don't deal with a lot of the peripheral stuff that's happening. They just go, okay, here's this very narrow story that we're trying to tell. And we really only need 6 episodes to do it. Because the other thing could be, too, maybe they're testing the waters. Like, okay, we'll do this 6-episode series, and if it's a big demand, then maybe we'll do more. I do find it strange, like you said, that Andor was already greenlit for a series, and we haven't seen anything from that yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I can see, like you said, taking your approach. If it was a laser focused thing, maybe Obi-Wan did something that tipped someone off, and they were like, "Hey, Vader, Obi-Wan's still alive," and he's just like, "No, that can't be. Are you serious? Are you sure?"
No, it's not true. That's impossible.
Search the footage. So they might have camera footage, or maybe he was spotted somewhere. Something happened and he got spotted, and he's like, "Oh, that is Obi-Wan." Okay, so maybe the whole thing is like Vader's just trying to get to him. Like, okay, we have to get rid of this guy. So maybe maybe the 6 episodes is just them trying to kill Obi-Wan, and then it's like, okay, all those attempts fail. Vader finally has to like, fine, I'll go do it, and then this is what that could just be the story.
The big face-up. That could very well be, and it would actually fit because,
yeah,
again, why have Hayden Christensen there? If you're having Hayden Christensen there, it's flashback stuff. Why would he keep flashing back? It would make sense if this whole thing were about him hunting Obi-Wan and trying to, either confront him or get rid of him or whatever. It would make sense that he would flash back to, his whole family guy. Yeah, you remember the time that
Happier times, yes.
Yeah, I mean, well, because from what I understand, everything I read, because the Hayden Christensen thing really threw me, because it's like, okay, if you're just going to put a dude in a suit, which I've already announced who's playing Vader in the suit, forgot who it was, but you don't need to bring Hayden Christensen back just to put a guy in a suit. And I had read that
he did actually put the suit on too. Though.
He did, but that was because that was sort of like a reward for him. They were actually going to put a different guy in the suit at the end of Revenge of the Sith, but he felt because he had been playing that character throughout this whole trilogy, and it would just be really super cool to be in the Vader suit on film. He requested that be the case, and they let him do it. They put lifts in and all this other stuff. But I'm talking about just bringing him back just to put him in a suit. And what I read was the fact that what they're going to do is they're going to flash back to when he was Darth Vader before the the whole accident. But the thing that confused me about that, though, was, I mean, they made it sound like, yeah, literally, it was like a half hour between the time it was like, and you shall be Darth Vader, to the time that he falls in the lava. It's like, well, how much could he have done, really?
Like, what else? Where else did he? I mean, unless it was something like in the temple.
Well, because, I know he was carrying out the mission too. I know he went to, was it Mustafar to get rid of Newt Gunray and all those guys? Yep. So I know he went there. And it could have been that
go to the temple.
Right, and it could have been, I don't know, maybe there was other missions like, hey, on your way back to the temple, you want to do like these 5 or 6 things before. Because, again, I mean, the way that everything was set up in episode 3, this is all happening almost in real time, and it's kind of like, okay, go get rid of these guys and then come back to the temple and just slaughter everybody with all the clone troopers. I don't see what they could be doing here.
Well, I think there could be some things because, once again, we saw, and along with Obi Wan, that's how they found out that it was Anakin, because they watched the security footage.
Right.
So there might have been things that were going on in that, because they were cutting in between stuff. So throughout that period of time, he could have been running into people like Jocasta Nu. He could have been running into.
We didn't run into Jocasta Nu. That we know because of a comic where he eventually faces her. Which was really strange, dude, to see him in a full-on lightsaber duel with her, and she was powerful, man. It's like
well, she's a librarian, man.
When you read that comic,
a lot of knowledge.
Absolutely, and it shows because when you actually see that comic, you're like, oh, she's not. You just kind of think she's like Aunt May or something, But it's like,
Oh, she was hot.
No.
Not the Tom Holland version.
Not the Tom Holland version. The original Aunt May, yes. I mean, unless you're kind of into that geriatric thing. I don't know. I mean,
Palpatine.
That's when you say, that's a handsome woman. Like, no woman wants to be called handsome. I mean, I'm sorry, but a little bit of a digression, I realize, but.
But yeah, I just think that maybe in that show though. In that moment, and maybe that's some of the things that Grogu even saw, because and that's how they could tie it in too, even to Mandalorian if they wanted to, because like Grogu was back then, and they always show him that's what he remembers is the whole
the clones
Jedi
coming
purge
in
thing.
and storming the
and wipe. So he might have seen Anakin and felt that darkness and just all types of stuff. So. It's very possible.
Yeah,
but I do like the fact that Palpatine more than likely will probably be in it, because once again, it's kind of like he should be there.
Yeah, it makes sense that he's there.
Because this is his thing.
It's his thing. It's his time. This is when he's at the kind of more or less the zenith of his power. I mean, it should. He should at least be there long enough to. I don't know. Give an order or, I mean, it doesn't have to be some super significant thing. It's something to move the whole story along, something that makes sense where maybe he's putting in little pieces of the puzzle. Because again, the only time that Palpatine really had any interaction with Obi Wan, I mean, besides when he was actually the Chancellor, Supreme Chancellor, actually. When he was basically when they were dueling Dooku and everything, and he was basically quickly dispatched as usual. But it's funny because it would be interesting to actually see Palpatine and Vader having a conversation about Obi-Wan post Revenge of the Sith. And I don't mean that in just ooh, wouldn't that be awesome fanboy moment. I mean, story-wise, I think that would actually really play well in tying together a lot of the things that we see in Episode 4. And I also think that Tarkin should be talking about him as well.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that. I mean, definitely I could see Tarkin, invoking the name of, of things of Obi-Wan, and just because, like I said, he was around.
Well, it's not just that. It's not just that. It's also the fact that, when he is here, are you sure? I mean, it's kind of like, whoa, really? I mean, it just seems like it's more than, let's just say, a casual familiarity with him. Like there's something else going on.
He knows, like I said, he knows how powerful Obi-Wan is, and of course he knows who Vader is, and he remembers how close those two were, because they were generals in the whole thing. Every time they got sent on missions, it was always those two together.
That's true.
And he Tarkin even made the comment, towards Anakin, like, oh, you're different than you take more risk, and you like kind of on the edge of flying by the seat of your pants here, kid. You're not like Obi Wan, and you know. So
Exactly.
he definitely understands, the severity of Obi Wan being around, um, or still being alive, and that's what I'm really curious too. Is just that how they're gonna make that scene still work, because if Vader had that duel, well, did he think Obi Wan died again?
Well, I mean, and here's the thing that I've
And
been thinking.
I mean,
I've been thinking about that a lot, especially as of late, and especially because we're really starting to come up on the premiere of this thing. I think that there are a lot of things, like I was talking about the whole Tarkin thing in A New Hope. There's a lot of things in A New Hope that if you don't necessarily take it strictly at face value, there's a lot of wiggle room in there for a lot of different things to happen. There's almost an untold story, dare I say, in what's not said. The whole in between the lines thing. Because, yeah, I had always thought the same thing. That, in fact, I remember going on record on this very show saying, hey, listen, if they face off, I might have a problem with that because in a way, it would almost cheapen or lessen the effect of A New Hope. But really, since I put a lot of thought into this and have read more about things and just seen the overall direction of where Obi-Wan's going, I changed my mind a little bit about that. I actually think in some ways, again, the key is they have to do it right, though. They cannot screw this up. And there's not a whole lot of room, I mean, it's a very laser-focused thing. You have to do this exactly right. Little to the right, a little to the left. Squish like grape, right? So
it's more like you got to hit that exhaust port like Luke did, man. You got to
exactly
it's only 2 meters.
Exactly.
That wiggle room is only 2 meters wide.
2 meters wide, and you can't mess this up. So I will preface the statement by saying, look, that is the caveat. That's the contingency upon which all this stuff works. But it could, I stress could, actually enrich the whole stuff from A New Hope. But they got to do it right. Mm-hmm. Now, even with Filoni and Favreau, and of course Deborah Chow is the showrunner for this thing, I think I would feel a little bit better if it were Bryce Dallas Howard. But it'll probably be okay. I don't know if I'm going to love it or not yet, because obviously, like I said, it's a very narrow window of rightness. They really have to do this thing really correctly. Otherwise, it could fail miserably, and it could actually take away from A New Hope. It's almost the same argument that a lot of people have made about Palpatine's return somewhat cheapens the whole ending of Return of the Jedi. I don't necessarily think that's true if you take the saga in totality. But I can understand why there's a lot of people that feel that way, though.
Yeah, if you really aren't up on the fact of what Palpatine had been studying and doing, I could understand that.
Right.
But if you are like us or people, that he was always into reincarnation, the alchemy, that type of stuff. He was always trying to find a way to, preserve himself, because he knew, and that's the thing, I think he realized that using the dark side of the Force, especially heavily, ages you. So he probably knew that his time, he was already older physically. He took a lot of beating, when he had that Force lightning that was shot back at him. That took a toll on his body. Had to, because now all of a sudden, he's walking with a cane and, all this type of stuff. So, yeah, I think that, he kind of saw like the end, and he was like, okay, well, how can I preserve myself in a way? Because, he's always been doing that. Even like I said, in the the prequel trilogy. Palpatine was always talking about, Darth Plagueis is the wise. He can keep himself. We can discover his secret on the Clone Wars not the Clone Wars, Rebels, when the world between worlds
Oh yeah,
episode,
right.
when he's like using that Sith magic to reach into, like, what I'm saying, he's doing all kinds of crap, man. So it's just like,
Oh yeah.
who knows what he's cooking up in his little laboratory in the back.
Well, and even
So,
even if you look at the death scene, he falls down, you just see this flash of like blue light or something. I mean, that could easily just be him floating around now in spirit form, transforming, exactly. So really, I think that it wasn't definitive. I mean, if you're gonna whine about something, whine about the whole Darth Maul thing. That guy was cut in half, falling down a shaft.
cut in half, falling down a shaft.
That's right. There's like physical death stuff there that it's like, look, man, and everybody's totally fine with it now.
Yeah, but I think that's absolutely true. And just one more point to the Palpatine thing is, because he's a Sith, he's already anticipating Vader trying to kill him.
Oh, sure.
So he's already anticipating death anyway. But
well, in the old expanded, in the expanded universe, he had even, and I don't know, I think they might have pulled some of this even into the newer canon, but he had clones of himself made, ready to absorb, so if this particular physical vessel happened to die, he could just zip into one of the clones. So even as far back as the expanded universe, this whole idea of him preserving himself as a Sith spirit, and that's honestly, who co-wrote with JJ there was some guy that co-wrote The Rise of Skywalker with them who was really up on the expanded universe. The old expanded universe, what's now Legends. I mean, that's probably where they got the whole thing from in the first place. So yeah, obviously,
Yeah, I mean, it stands to reason. Palpatine, well, the Sith, once again, their whole thing is they crave power, right? And they never want, once they have power, they never want to really let it go.
Right.
So
it seems to really be their only purpose.
Yeah, it's accumulate power,
and to keep
the thing about the Jedi, the thing about the Jedi is that, like, they yield themselves to the Force, and so that's why I think they're allowed to come back as spirits, because they give themselves up to what's already natural. Whereas the Sith, they can't do it because they don't give up themselves, they don't give up their power to the Force. So they have to circumvent it in such a way. And I think that's why Palpatine kind of came up with, like, okay, well, I could do this Sith magic like the Dathomir witches or something like that. And then I could take my spirit and I could dump it into another body. Like, he's got to come up with all this, circumstantial ways of circumventing the
Well, it's
the
because
Force, where
the spirit
the
has
Jedi
to
just
move.
lend themselves.
Right, because they remain in spirit form, where he has to transfer to another physical vessel. Now, what's interesting, and it makes me wonder if they're ever going to broach this subject, whether it be in the Acolyte or, I don't know, and anything. And that is, there is such a thing as the Sith spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which
because
is
it haunts. Because use it.
Well, Exar Kun, yeah, Exar Kun. I mean,
Yeah.
that's still kind of legendsy, but I think they may have brought him into canon. I don't know. That one's still out. But the point is yeah, I mean, there have been examples, whether it's in newer canon or Legends or whatever. There's examples of this stuff all over the place, and they've implied it now, but because I think with Exar Kun, he was inhabiting the actual Yavin 4 temple. So it's still kind of an embodiment in a way. And I think he was looking for somebody to embody, actually, when Luke was in there. And some of his Jedi. Yeah. So that concept has been around for a while, and I'm sure it's going to play into a lot of this stuff, but it's how far are they going to go with it? That's the question. And then how much of this stuff is going to come into play with Palpatine too?
Mm-hmm.
Because again, no matter what you think of what's happening post Return of the Jedi and Palpatine comes back, the difference is that Palpatine here actually makes sense. Like, this is a good use of Palpatine. Now, how much we're going to get of him, we don't know. I do find it strange that Ian McDiarmid came out with that. It's like if you actually read the interview or whatever, it's almost like there's no real reason for him to just say it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I can understand him maybe not saying, no, I'm not involved with this, but I'm looking forward to the show or whatever, but it just, I don't know, just the whole nature and the way he did it, it seemed like he was telling us without telling us. And it would make perfect sense because, again, Palpatine is at the zenith of his power at this point. But, of course, as always,
As always.
It's
not about us.
It's not about us. It's almost like we got this scripted thing now, right? It's actually about you guys. Because once again, we love discussing Star Wars with you. So, while you're hitting that like and subscribe button, because after all, hitting the like button really helps the channel, hitting the subscribe button lets you know when we're going to put out another show. We do stream live every Monday and Friday at 8 o'clock. This coming Monday, we're not actually going to be live. We did a pre-recorded show because we're not going to be able to do a live show on Monday. But it'll be on a premiere. I'm going to try to chat in. Hopefully Daryl can chat in. So that way, it'll still sort of feel like our normal shows, but it'll be pre-recorded. So definitely watch for that. But hit the like button, hit the subscribe button so you know when shows are coming up and other content that we're going to start putting up there as well. The question is, what do you think of Palpatine returning in Obi Wan? Do you think it's a good idea? Do you think that they should just leave Palpatine alone? Let us know in the comments section. We love discussing Star Wars with you guys. Don't forget you can also continue the discussion on Facebook. We have a Facebook group called Head to Head, a Star Wars Community. And the Facebook group allows us to be able to chat with you guys a little bit more in depth. And make sure you invite all your friends to it too. So, Monday, we can actually announce this one because we actually pre-recorded it so we know what we talked about. We basically are talking about the Mandoverse. A trailer was recently revealed that they essentially did this whole thing where they took season 1 and 2 of The Mandalorian and season 1 of the Book of Boba Fett and said, hey, watch all these episodes and basically be a part of the Mandoverse. And now you go, well, what's the Mandoverse? Well, watch Monday and we'll talk all about it. So, until then, may the Force... I'm actually not going to say that.
No, you're not. You're going to tell them who you are. Once again.
No, I know. But I mean, I was actually going to go into something else, and that's why I slid into that. There was another point that I wanted to make before we left, and then I just slid into the whole may the Force be with you for some reason. Oh, I know what it was. So I was thinking that what we should do is actually either choose characters to go in depth or maybe, some sort of review type of a thing. Because normally Mondays, that's what we like to do. We like to do in-depth discussions that aren't necessarily news-based, but they're more topical or, maybe about a character. So let us know in the comments section if there's anybody that you want us to talk about, any topic you want us to go more in-depth on. We'd love to hear from you in that as well. And now I will end this by saying, I am Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you. always.